Hey friends, welcome back to season 6 of Shop Talk.
This is where we talk about all things related to health and well-being for people who live and work cross-culturally.
Glad you're here. Well, friends, welcome back to Shop Talk. We have such a special guest with us today. We're so excited to be able to talk with our guest. James, can you introduce him for us?
Yes, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Johnstone Ndunde, who is the SIL Global Director. So the organization that Brandi and I serve with, he is the leader of, in a role he stepped into in May 2025. He brings 20 years of experience in leadership, Bible translation, literacy, and language development across Africa, having served with SIL Global and previously with Bible Translation and Literacy, BTL, in Kenya. His work has been rooted in advancing education and spiritual opportunities within African language communities, so individuals and communities can flourish. In previous roles, Dr. Ndunde has guided programs developing initiatives and instructional materials in schools and adult education in a number of countries in Africa. As Director of Strategy and then Area Director for SIL Anglo-Lusophone Africa, he fostered collaboration with key partners and church communities, expanded regional and global funding capabilities, and implemented initiatives to develop emerging leaders. Dr. Ndunde holds a PhD in Leadership and Governance from Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, an MA in Educational Studies from Africa International University, and a bachelor's in education in commerce and economics from the University of Nairobi. Johnstone lives in Nairobi, Kenya, with his wife, Esther. So it's a great honor to have you on today.
What a joy to be here. Just looking forward to a wonderful discussion with you all. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
What led us to this conversation was we had one of our listeners and one of our fellow staff was wanting us to talk more about cross-cultural working, but not just from this idea of all of the expats, but also what is it like for the different communities that we work in. SIL has global priorities, global plan that is really about localization, being engaged in the church, and being being well nourished. There you go. And I would love just to talk to Dr. Ndunde today about what that's like, particularly from his perspective as he is now leading a massive cross-cultural organization. So would you like to just tell us a little bit about your experience working cross-culturally, your experience as a Kenyan that is now leading this fairly large international cross-cultural organization, and a little bit about former mental models that have now shifted, and I'll give the floor to you.
Yeah, maybe before I respond to my experiences just right there, let me just talk a little bit about this concept of Christians working from everyone to everywhere. And I just wanted to draw us to the attention of the work that was done by Samuel Escobar. Around 2003, Samuel Escobar wrote a book that I think it has had significant impact in Christian mission. This book was called The New Global Mission, the Gospel from Everywhere to Everyone. And the central theme in this book was that world Christianity had shifted from a Western-led movement to a truly global and polycentric mission force, such that today mission is no longer from the West to the rest, but from everyone to everywhere. And some key factors that Samuel Escobar sort of brings key ideas is that one is that there has been a rise in the majority church. So that if you think about the demographics of Christians, the center has sort of shifted from the West, as we know it, to places like Africa, Asia, and Latin America, where there are new missionary movements that are forming by local cultures, gifts, and perspectives. And that Escobar critiques a little bit the older mission paradigms that tied Christianity to Western culture, and argues for mission models that are rooted in justice, compassion, and local ownership. He looks at things like globalization and migration patterns where diasporas go, and thinks about how the gospel has spread that way. And I think you can juxtapose these with what you see in the book of Acts, that as disciples dispersed, so did the gospel disperse. And he looks at issues around holistic mission, things being from evangelism, discipleship, transformation, advocacy, belonging together as opposed to those things being different. And perhaps the key thing here is mutuality in partnerships, that collaboration for us to have impact in the gospel comes from the fact that the Western church must collaborate with the majority world church, learn from one another, share resources, wisdom, and leadership. Because actually, if you do that, you get to that point of ensuring that people are sharing God's mission. It's Chris Wright that actually looks at the mission and tells us that mission does not belong to us, mission belongs to God. And if mission belongs to God, then God is calling everyone from everywhere to participate in that mission. And so when we talk about things like localization in SIL, and when we talk about expanding the place of the local, it is not necessarily about we do not need the foreigner or the expert to be in that context. It is about opening up space so that we can utilize all the giftings that are in the body of Christ fully to fulfill God's mission. And I believe that is the most central thing, even when we think about localization or any other thing that we talk about in SIL. It is about God's mission, and this mission being done by everyone that is God is calling. And so God will call people from the West, but God will also call people from the South. God is calling everyone to everywhere for his mission. And if that be the case, then our systems, structures, our governance, and everything that we do so that we can have a successful mission and even staffing needs to be aligned to what God is doing so that we can have an impact in Christian ministry.
Woo.
I just want to cheer, be like, that's wonderful. Very, very well said.
Thank you.
I wonder if you're looking at this now, looking at globalization and just empowering local leaders. Where do you see the role of, I want to do air quotes here, the Western Church, and that it has traditionally been, well, as James had mentioned, from the West to the rest. So, do you see a continued role in these classically known or sending organizations and sending countries and how things are developing?
Absolutely. There is a significant role that the church from the West continues to play. I think that what needs to do is some of the shifting of the positioning of that church. So, from a director, leader of the mission to a co worker, partner with the other colleagues in the context where we want to serve. And so I still want to see people come from different places, but I think I want to see their attitude change from I'm going to do this for these people to we're going to work together to serve the Lord. And looking at your colleagues as co-workers, as people who equally are blessed by the Lord, equally called by the Lord, equally empowered by the Lord to participate in his mission and working alongside them and not working for them. And I think that is the difference between mission from the rest from the West to the rest to mission from everyone to everywhere. It is a call to partnership. It's a call to every one of us doing things in the way we are supposed to do. Secondly, is that every local culture has got some unique characteristics that make mission use successful in those particular places. And my desire is to see that we actually get into local communities, understand those unique characteristics, and therefore understand how do we bring our giftings in ways that connect so deeply with some of the characteristics that we are seeing here for effective mission, so that the things, how we conducted mission maybe, or how we conduct mission in the USA or in Germany or in any other Western context may be different from how you conduct mission actually cross-culturally, because God has blessed us with a diverse world, with diverse giftings. And so how do you come alongside? You need to understand the drivers of change in the places where you are so that you can actually work with your colleagues in that particular place to see that change happen. And so I think it is how do we bring the mind shift in the local cultures. I think sometimes we've not been successful because we have wanted to create people in our own image as opposed to create people in the image of the Lord Jesus Christ. And so I think that is what needs to happen. We need to all be focusing on God and to be able to say, okay, within our cultures, God is at work to transform our cultures, yes, but also to use our cultures to bring transformation.
And I think what we see in the global mission movement in particular is a very this change has taken a long time to get here, which is unfortunate. But you ask people, I think 50 years ago, they probably would have said something like that, but their behavior was very different, right? They might have said,
Yeah.
"Oh, of course we're working together," but then they come in with all of the tools, all the resources, all the plan. They're developing strategy and not including anyone from a local context. These kinds of things. So we're moving towards localization, and I think about particularly the expatriate training that happens, and there's kind of this depth of preparation that happens before somebody goes, and there's weeks and weeks of training and learning different cultures, and then how to be open-minded, and there's books and resources, and then they go to a context, and then I think often the local workers, the local organizations aren't necessarily given that same level of cross-cultural training, but are thrust into this cross-cultural work, and they're also working cross-culturally even though they live in their context. In the Even in the international humanitarian aid organizations, 90% of the global INGO staff are local staff. So it's not just the faith-based, it's much broader than that. What does training and development look like for our local context?
So James, let me just go back to the first statement that you made about, people being trained and then being thrust before I respond to your question. And one of the things that I just want to say here is that I think I really admire the pioneers of early missionary movement. To be honest, we wouldn't be where we are today if those pioneers wouldn't have pioneered, sometimes in the ways they did, because the context at that time was significantly different from the context that we are experiencing today. Think about educational levels in the local context in the 60s, in the 50s, in the 40s, during the big conferences that encouraged people to go. There was very little education levels. And so when you came to work with your local colleagues, you were actually coming to work with people that were less educated than you, that needed a lot of empowerment from you. And you may not have found people in that local context that even believed in what you are trying to do. And so you needed to actually have a different posture from the posture that we are advocating for today. The second thing that I think we need to think about is just think about geographical difficulties in reaching one place to another. And so a missionary needed a certain training because you are going to be thrown into some area where it's very hard to be extracted from. And you needed to know all these things. And you needed to be a certain kind of person to go through certain difficulties to even survive in those particular places. And you needed to actually have a way of insulating yourself and doing things in a different way. And the missionary project, this is a controversial subject, in some places was accompanied by the colonial project. And so there were a number of issues there that actually create challenges in how we do mission and how we view mission and mission movement. I think if you understand that background of how the context of ministry in the 60s, 70s, you are proud of the people that dared to step out. Some of those people packed their clothes in coffin. They knew they were going to places and they will never come back. I mean, it takes significant sacrifice to be able to do that. And a lot of my colleagues in SIL were actually called into mission during that time in the early years, and they have given everything they have. Some have given everything to be able to serve the Lord. And I am full of admiration of those colleagues of mine. Now, fast forward to today, the context is changing. The educational levels are different. The geographical hurdles are more and more being overcome. And the world is becoming globalized. It is becoming a smaller space than it used to be, not in terms of the geographical mass of land, but just in terms of what, for example, internet and IT has done to connect different people in different parts of the world. And so when you think about that way, then it means that we need to be able to work differently. And that is why one of the things that we want to do is to be able to also begin changing and shifting some mental models with our local colleagues. For example, if they knew that mission came from the West, expertise came from the West, money came from the West, resources for mission came from the West, then we create a church that is dependent on the Western church. And it does not matter how much we talk about the church in Africa rising or Asia or wherever, if we are not paying attention to the mental models or social dependencies that were created earlier on, We are not going to set this church free to be able to accomplish her mission fully. And so that's where the place of training, I think, begins. And for us in SL, we have been trying to say, let us challenge our mental models, the ingrained assumptions, the truth that are within our subconscious, that have the shortcuts in our mind that when we say mission, what does it mean? I was very very challenged the other day. One of our colleagues in a country in East Africa went to a local church and said, "We serve God in mission here, and would like you to contribute towards mission." And they said, "No, we don't contribute to mission here." The same church went to a neighboring country and found our colleagues in that neighboring countries and said, "Would like to contribute money and expertise to help you do your mission." What was happening? What was happening in that place is that this church had been taught that mission is moving from your country to another country. And so they didn't see helping our colleagues in their country as a priority as much as they saw helping our colleagues across the border as their priority, because that is how they have been taught to define mission. So we need to help our colleagues to define mission, to understand what mission stands for today, and to know how to bring their rightful voice and play their rightful role in this mission. They also need to understand the cross-cultural elements of other people. Where are they coming from? How do they understand mission? How do I relate with them? I think that is something that is missing a lot in the mission movement today, because unless we are empowered to understand where our Western brothers are coming from, we do not have the ability to engage with them in the right way. And so I just think that there's quite a lot that needs to happen cross education that will actually bring the potential that is in the church in the global south to bear, if it were actually to bear appropriately.
It sounds like there really needs to be a shift even from like the culture of sending organizations too, and their understanding of what they're bringing of themselves and their history too. As you mentioned, there's a rich history there, but it is something that does need to shift and consciously shift in order to empower the local believers and the locals who are working and who they want to partner with.
Exactly, Brandy. I have actually talked to some of the training institutions here and said, when you train your people, don't tell them that you are the heroes in the story. Don't tell them that you are the one that is going to change the world. Tell them that God is doing something and you're joining God and your colleagues around the world to do that. And when people come with that mindset, they are coming as co-workers and not as owners of a mission. That, to me, is significant. It brings a significant change.
And the locals know that and they feel empowered. If the people coming in have this attitude of partnership and coming alongside and being curious about, who they are, how God has uniquely made them, the locals can sense that and they'll feel more encouraged in what they're doing as well.
And that's why we have defined localization in ISIL as that process in which, in every context and culture, the organization does ministry in a way that is relevant in their context. And we have given parameters which are organizational leadership. We want to see both local and global leaders working together to shape a vision that can be effective in a particular context. In staffing, we want to see both local and global staff working in every level of the organization so that they can bring all their giftings to bear and perspectives that will create a unique perspective and right solutions for the places where they are serving. In organizational culture, we do not want to superimpose our Western culture in a local context. We would love to see what elements of organizational culture helps an organization to thrive in a particular place so that it is planted with local roots in a particular place, and so that we don't treat mission as a project that has got a beginning and an end, but we treat project as this continuous iterative interaction and action of God in communities from time to time. And we see to it that when even the brother or sister from a Western context is gone, the locals continue with that mission because it is a mission that they have both come up together to think about, to plan, to strategize, and to execute. We are talking about resourcing. We want to see resource coming from global, but we also want to see resources coming from the local. And I keep telling those that give us resources that please make sure that as you give us resources, you're also not stifling the movement, because there's a way in which you can give resources and create your own parameters of what you call success. And that is not necessarily success in the local context. And so we want to have robust conversation, even with those that give us resources, to say, what are some of the ways in which when you are resourcing, you are blessing? But we also want to see resources from the local coming to bear in that mission to be able to help in that particular mission. And so we are talking about, the organizational culture. We're talking about governance. How do you govern? How do you bring local governance expertise to help an organization so that they can be able to interact appropriately in their local environment? And if you do that, then the organization is developing local roots.
How do you shift organizational culture as we think about localization?
I think shifting organizational culture is one of the biggest challenges of leadership. They say that good strategies are chewed by organizational culture for breakfast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to think about how do you bring change in organizational culture. One of the things that we have done in SIL is to re-examine our mentor models, which is, where are we? Asking ourselves those honest questions like, where are we? And the activities, like the activities that you just pointed out, it is something that helps you to shift, because in your mind you may think this is how we are doing, but reality, people are seeing you differently. The second thing that we are doing in SIL that is helping us to shift organizational culture is planting people from local cultures into SIL and giving them positions that have got voice and influence, because definitely they are going to do things in a different way. And that way, they're going to begin shifting the culture slowly by slowly. And then we want to give them cultural coaches so that they also don't become failures in that process of trying to change, being themselves and fitting in an international organization. We want to give them cultural coaches so that we make sure that they are understanding some of the pressures that they are facing. And the last thing that we are doing is the Leadership Pillars course, which is basically something that helps to frame for every leader in SIL what leadership should look like in this organization. And we want to continuously observe and see the values and behaviors that are expounded in the leadership pillars being seen in the lives of leaders. And it is going to be part of actually how we measure performance, is how are you doing in the as a leader in the things that we talk about as important for us as an organization. I think you need to help people understand what does the appropriate culture look like. And I've always said that the appropriate culture is not to shift to the local culture entirely, because there are some elements in the local culture that may not be desirable. There is always a balance in between there, and there is a word of God that should guide us, and that should just help us to create a good cultural dynamic. And then we want to move from there to go to the place of saying, okay, so this is the desired place. How do we move there? And continuously measure the progress that we are making towards going towards that organizational culture that we desire to have. And so that's why organizational culture is part of the parameters that we measure when we measure localization, and we report that actually to the board. That's why diversity is part of those things that we measure when we report to our board. Again, because we believe that it is important to track some of this information to see what changes it is bringing in the organization. And I can tell you, to be very honest, I have seen a shift in culture in SIL in the last few years. I have seen people wanting to be a community, and the concept that the previous administration brought, which was the concept of the community of grace. How do I understand your culture and understand my culture and use grace to bring us together and to help us to coexist in a productive way, not just peaceful way, but in a productive way, so that we can be able to serve the communities that we want to serve. And so thinking about those as soft ways of bringing in a cultural change and making sure that at the center of it all is our spirituality, it is our hearts. And if we are able to touch our hearts so that our hearts are connected with God, so that our hearts are connected with the master that we are trying to serve, I believe that God is actually an equalizer of culture, because he brings who he is and his character into the behaviors that we are supposed to have as an organization. And that in itself helps to change our culture. And so missiological reflection the Community of Grace and Hope. Those are programs, projects that are basically designed to help us to change our culture by not forming it entirely on the local, but form it looking at what is good in the local, what is good in the global, and having a community of grace that therefore has got a place of success.
Hmm. And I think what SIL has done well, even when I went to leadership pillars, and is really investing in this. Like there's a financial element of preparing and training leaders that you,
Yes.
as an organization, need to be willing to do. I think so often organizations are like, well, we have a need here, let's put somebody in that spot and then worry about training later. So I think there's a really practical way of saying we were really going to invest in leaders and in culture change that actually helps that happen. If you don't do that, it's not going to occur on its own.
And James, if I can give you a little bit of a snippet into the Global Plan 2.0, it's the fact that we have a whole strand, a theme of the Global Plan that will be handling our human resources. And we want to see people thrive. We want to see a multi-generational workforce. We want to see leadership that is helping people to thrive. And we want to measure those categories. But it is not just measuring. It is about empowering people, which means training. And so we will be rolling out a number of trainings that will move forward. And we are doing a little bit of some changes in the leadership pillar so that it is not an event. We'll have an event, but we'll also have what we call the leadership pillars journey, so that the person comes to an event, but also they journey with others along a number of months, so that some of the things that we are trying to explain, inculcate, can have enough time to sink.
Mm.
What are some of the challenges that you see in developing local leaders? And maybe what are some of the ways from more traditional Western sending organizations that individuals could get in the way of this development?
Well, number one, just bottom line, it takes money to develop good leaders. And so you have to be willing to invest in it. And SIL has to prioritize um, the resources that God has given us to know what do we want to invest in. And there is always a juggle as a leader on how much you invest where. That's one thing. The other thing is really identifying the right people that God is calling. We have a culture in SIL where sometimes we put trust as the first and core thing. But there are other things like competence that should go together with trust that sometimes we overlook. And one of the things that we need to do is shifting mental models of how do we bring people in the organization? How do we design God's call in people's life? How do we design their trust? And how do we design their competencies so that by the time you're bringing in new people at the local level, they're people that have a chance to grow and to become that which God has called them to be. And then thirdly, I would like to say our posture. If we continue doing things for people, if we don't have faith that they can do some of the things that they need to do, if we always look at that glass as half empty, then we will never be able to allow them that space to grow, to become. If we are not keen to listen to some of their voices, even some of their critiques, we will not be able to create that space that is needed for them to thrive in the organization. I was in a context, and I'll not name the context, but I'll just explain the thing, which is we had this young guy who had done something that normally takes 3 years to do in 3 months, and the response of the SEO there was, well, you must have done it wrongly because you did it too fast. And I challenged them. I said, what you need to do is to tell him what is the wrong thing that he has done. Look at his processes, look at the work that he's done, look at the results. And when they investigated, they actually found that he had done his work well. And so, is there something that you can learn from that young man? Definitely. There was something that we could learn from that young man. And I keep saying, we need to be able to give space, give room for us to say, we are not the experts, we are co workers. Let's learn from one another. That to me is a core element of humility that Jesus calls us into, to be humble, to know that we can learn from one another. If we have that attitude and that posture, then actually we will actually start learning a lot of good things from our colleagues around the world. And the last thing that I just want to say is hesitate to step in sometimes.
Mm.
Allow people to make mistakes because that is part of learning and growing. If you want them to be perfect from day one, they will never be perfect from day one. If you allow them to make mistake, if you allow them to grow, they will grow. I also can give you an example of a leader who had some interns, and she was busy this day and she needed to give them something to do. And she told them, go learn about this principle. They went. Not only did they learn, but they actually developed materials using that principle. They came back to her and she was like, you mean you could do this? I had not, she thought that she needed to wait until she has time to teach them.
Mm.
But actually, these young people were teaching themselves. They were ahead of the curve. And the question that changed her way of mentoring them from that day. She never again waited to teach them. She gave them a challenge and came alongside them. Can we do that to some of our local staff? I think if we did that, we will see more and more fruit. We'll see more and more results coming our way. And so I just think our attitude, our posture, how we do things needs to continuously change if we are going to see leaders in the local level context rising.
What are some signs of health? I mean, I think what you just described is one. A little humility is certainly, I think, an indicator of health. Psychological safety, which is what you described, that freedom to try something and to make a mistake is the core element of psychological safety. If people feel safe, they will be more
Yes.
likely to try something. What are some other elements of health in a multicultural team?
Well, I also actually, the ability for people to agree that they can disagree,
Mm.
respect. Okay, healthy tension. I love one of our units in East Africa where you have probably equal amount of local staff as our experts. And there is mutual respect, there is mutual critique of one another, there is mutual ability. So people allow themselves to be challenged cross-culturally. And you don't take that to heart, but you just take that as something that is beautiful, that needs to be part of it. And so I think that a healthy team is not a team that doesn't have disagreements. A healthy team is a team that knows how to handle disagreements and bring resolution to that disagreement. And a healthy team needs to allow for sufficient dissension that allows us to be uncomfortable so that we can think outside the box and be able to grow. So I think that's another sign of a healthy team. I think another sign of a healthy team is a team that celebrates. A lot of times I feel like we are always beating ourselves and thinking about the next best thing that we can do and how we didn't do well here, how we need to improve here. I think we need to be looking back and seeing where we've come from and thank God. Just stop and thank God and say, God, we are so grateful we are where we are today. Celebrate the milestones that the Lord is allowing us to have. Those, to me, are significant things that I think we need to continuously have and work in as leaders, as organization and as units, so that we can be able to see the milestones that we are coming through and how the Lord is helping us to grow and develop. That is a sign of a healthy leadership. And lastly, it's a sign where people can rest and their work continues, where you can take a fallow and your work continues. You don't have to stop your project when you go to fallow. If you actually doing that, it means that was something to happen to you, then that program stops. And I think a sign of health is that even when I'm not there, things continue. That's why, James, I'm looking forward to next week. I take leave and rest, and that's I will
Good for
continue.
you.
That's right.
Good.
Yeah, because I think
And
we
it
need
could,
to be able to allow ourselves to move out of that space so that others can also do some of the things that we are doing.
yeah. And I think to constantly remind ourselves too, especially as Westerners, that yes, when it's moving forward, it may not move forward in the way that we think it should move forward, but it could be move
Exactly.
forward in another absolutely beautiful way that the Lord is using. And I think that's just a really good mindset to always have in front of us.
Yeah. And that your way is not the best. And maybe the
Yeah.
other way, maybe not be the way you do things, but actually it advances the kingdom.
Mm.
And that is important.
As we wrap up, I wonder, we have a lot of listeners that are from sending organizations, yes, from North America, but also I think from more traditional Western sending countries. Do you have any final thoughts or recommendations or advice for them as they still prepare and send people to different
I
countries?
want to I want to tell those leaders, please continue sending people to us. I think there has been a message outside there that says we don't need people. And I want to strongly say that is not an accurate position of SIL. SIL continues to say that we need cross-cultural workers. SIL says that when you send cross-cultural workers, let's have a conversation. What are they coming to do? What is the knowledge that we are looking for? What are the skills that we're looking for? What are the attitudes that we're looking for? And like I said at the beginning, we want people that have a mental model of co-workers, people that will come and work alongside their local colleagues for God's glory, for his kingdom. I think that the church in the West still has a significant role to play in God's mission here in the countries that are in the global South. But I think that what is important is to ensure that our posture of sending it matches the needs of the receiving. And that is very important. And we want to walk alongside all of you to know what does this mean, to have conversations with you all about how this means, so that you can be meeting our needs and meeting them in the most effective way. But I want to say, please don't say that the church in the West is now in the South is now doing all this work and we can't send workers there. We need people. The Bible says, Jesus told us that the workers are few, the harvest is plentiful. It remains so 2,000 years later, sadly. The workers are still few. The harvest is still great. There's a lot that I would like to do in SIL as executive director that I can't do today. The other thing is that some of the roles that people would come to do would be administrative roles, would be helping roles. And I think in the past, we've so much recruited with the field worker as the only thing that we want to recruit for in mind. But I want us to expand our horizon and think, what are the needs? And so how do we meet those needs?
Thank you. This has been
Yeah.
an enriching conversation. I feel like you've spoken so well and so clearly and eloquently about your hopes and your dreams for localization. It's been a good conversation.
Yes.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Brady. I've really enjoyed being with you all. And thank you for the stimulating conversation and how you ask questions and how you just smile to keep me going.
I just loved listening to you. It's been wonderful. So,
Right.
I'm so glad you're taking a break soon.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I will say,
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Ndunde
Hey.
has continued a tradition of actually sending an email to all of our staff saying, hey, Christmas break, let's take it off. Don't do your
Yeah.
emails. Don't also work and then make everybody else work because you're contacting them. So
Yes.
leading by example.
Great. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that.
Thank
So
you.
I can tell James I can't edit over Christmas. I'm not doing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks so much for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Now go live your PhD. So we need to figure out how you live that PhD, James.
As you know,
Yes.
the best dissertation is a finished dissertation.
I know. And then you are given now the power to think on your own.
Yeah.
You no longer are constrained to quote people and constrain your thoughts in certain frameworks. So just go and fly. Yeah.
Great. Come back.
Come back to us, please. And now my job is
Okay.
just to do whatever James tells me to do. So. Okay, I'm not going to put this in the recording, but I've been so nervous about pronouncing your last name correctly that I'm like, I don't know how to address you. So I just been, but I don't want
That's all
to not address